Welcome to another episode of the Information Addicts Podcast. My name is Cassidy. I'm an information addict, and this is my podcast where I explore what it means to consume more responsibly. Today's conversation is with my friend Lucas. This is actually a pretty old recording. We recorded this back, I think, in January, but I'm finally able to kind of release it now that I have had more time to actually sit down and get content ready to be passed out into the universe. But I'm really excited about this conversation because I feel like it really aligns with my want to move towards more simplicity and understanding what it is we do to combat this constant need to consume, especially online and information and news that comes around the world. I've been around sort of this little Cornell TLC estuary for a long time, and this conversation feels a lot like those early conversations that we had where we were just talking to each other and meeting each other. And this one's kind of special because this is the first time me and Lucas have actually been able to sit down and meet each other as people and understand our stories a little bit deeper and share that with each other. Not in sort of a small talk capacity. So it's fun to be able to share that. And it's also, I think, very meaningful because what I have found that the more that I go and try to understand people and their stories and what drives them, it makes that need to consume information and understand the world through my intellect a lot less dire. And it helps me to ground and find meaning and why I look to find answers through information in the first place. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this sort of old school rando style conversation because I definitely enjoyed it. Lucas, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's exciting. I know we have hung out a few times, but we haven't had to have like a one-on-one conversation. I know your brother more than you do, so it's good to finally sit down and have an actual chat.
Yeah.
But before I get too far, why don't I start with you? Tell me a little bit about yourself for myself, and then just people who don't know who you are, who are watching.
Thank you. So for starters, there's a bit of a drill in the background. I hope it's going to be okay for the people at home.
It's
I
fine.
think it will be fine. My name is Lucas. I am 22 years old, last time I checked, and my brother is Aaron. So some people will be familiar. He was
Yeah.
at the Mannheim Festival that you organized.
Yeah, and he's been on my channel before too. So
Yeah,
he's making his rounds on the little corner.
exactly. So he's also the one that introduced me to all of this. I remember the first time I heard of Paul was when Aaron appeared on his channel with my father. And we were all just like laughing about it. Thought it was funny.
Was that before or after they met here in the Netherlands?
Before, definitely.
Before, okay.
I think, yeah, like a couple years ago.
Okay.
And there's always a quote that we chip out as kids that my dad says that his first 4 kids were planned and the last 2 not. So it's just a little thing to my younger brothers to just make sure they remember where they stand. So my brother I think from when I was about 16, my brother started talking about Jordan Peterson. So this is 6 years ago now. Does that make sense? 2018? Yeah, something right there.
That feels like a long time. that makes me stressed out. Like, that was 6 years ago that started. Jeez, it feels like nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 18 is close. And I would just dislike Jordan Peterson intuitively because my brother liked him so much. And I just always heard him in the background. And then my father started listening to him in the car on our way to vacations. And yeah, I basically, growing up, was kind of, I had an aversion to the church and to the faith that I was raised in. My father is a theologian, amongst other things. So he really loved religion and he loved to give that to us and to speak about it. So we read the Bible every day and went to church every week. And it was, for me, it was difficult because I grew up in, TV, internet culture.
Right.
And that was extremely atheistic and it was all sciencey. And so that for me was like, well, what are these stupid religious people doing? And that was my family. So yeah. I felt a bit like misplaced in a sense. And I think I adopted like a scientific materialistic worldview for the majority of my childhood. And yeah, I guess my brother, Aaron, I mean, he studies philosophy, he teaches it a bit. He always confronted me with my beliefs and worldview. And he does the same now still with me, but also with my younger brothers and with other siblings who think differently. And he basically really got me to think, because I have always been someone who wants to know truth about things and wants to figure out how things work. And I was always very skeptical about things. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it did appeal to me the way my brother approached it, because it's more analytical, the way he looks at religious questions and truth and philosophy and all these things. So yeah, how did I get into this little corner? I guess I just started listening to Vervaeke because my brother wouldn't shut up about this meaning crisis series. And it sounded cool enough to listen to. Like he's like, this is really. And I mean, most people, when they hear there's a 50-hour series about meaning or whatever.
They're like, okay, and too long.
Yeah, exactly. But for me, I don't know. I've always liked the challenge, and I like to do things that people didn't expect of me that I would be able to do. And the 50-hour challenge sounded pretty fun, so I figured why not give it a go. But at this point, I was very like anti Christian or religion, so I was very much like I was more attracted to Vervaeke because he seemed to always be a bit averted to that as well when he spoke
Sure.
more sciencey.
And
So
probably
John
much
Vervaeke,
more uh, educational in the sense, coming from
yeah,
university. It was,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, you have the both of the like the science as well.
yeah,
So that gave it a bit of authority for me.
yeah.
So okay, so I'm gonna have to speak a bit about my last year in high school because I was a pretty bad kid growing up. Well, bad. Let's say I drank a lot. I didn't really do well in school. And when I was 18, I hit kind of a breaking point with that lifestyle. I had a bad night and drank so much I didn't really remember stuff. And I got home and I had to throw up, and my father was just there. And I do remember coming home and him looking at me with just, I don't know, I felt such shame. I don't know how he looked at me from his perspective, but I just felt deep shame. And then the next day I had a serious talk with my parents, and they said, you got to get off of liquor and got to stop doing that. And so that started with just that. And then after a month, I was like, guys, I'm going to stop drinking for a little bit, like 2 weeks or whatever. And that 2 weeks turned into 4 years now, because I realized it just didn't bring me anything good.
Mhm.
Um, Nothing really good ever came of it in my life.
Do
So,
you know what was driving you to it?
oh, yes, um, confidence that I didn't have sober,
Mm.
a way to deal with insecurity,
Mm.
a way to deal with social anxiety. Um, and it's also a way to, I guess, think I would be cooler if I would drink a lot. And, it's just the usual, really.
Mm.
And so this was my last year of high school. And I also realized that I'm kind of too old for all of this. And this was the first time I got like into clubs legally. And I was like, what am I doing here?
Hmm.
Like this, everything's so sweaty and people, it's just a weird thing, actually. If I really look at it retrospectively, it's just weird. And yeah, I wanted to get out. So I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm like, okay, I can finish high school. Let's do it well. So I started to get actually really motivated, and I went the opposite way. And I've always had kind of an extreme personality where it's like I'm either all into something or not in at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I went for that and I finished high school successfully. And then I got really into like self-help stuff, and Jordan Peterson came with that.
Yeah.
So Jordan
I can
Peterson,
imagine that. Yeah.
yeah, he snuck into the self-help corner of the internet. And then through that, he opened doors to other things. Where the atheists would usually say that Jordan Peterson talks a lot of sense, except for that religious stuff. I think a lot of people in the corner feel the opposite. So
Yeah, that's probably true.
yeah,
Well,
that,
at least to a point.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I don't think they think he's full of nonsense.
No, 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 absolutely not. But when he starts to talk about God, tune out.
I don't even know if that's totally true. I just think there's something where Peterson wasn't enough when it came to God.
Mm,
It made
yeah.
sense to a point, and then it wasn't enough. And so that's where you see Peugeot and Paul and sort of the
Sorry,
religious figures coming in.
you're going from the perspective of this little corner.
Yeah, I am.
So I was talking from the atheist.
Oh, from the atheists. Yes.
Okay, so that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you said that in this little corner, they think different.
Yeah, like when they look at Jordan Peterson, they see such power in when he speaks about biblical stories, but
Oh,
then
okay.
they're less impressed with all the political.
Yes.
Whereas with a lot of people that are more like
The
pragmatic
opposite.
and
Okay,
yeah.
I'm totally with you now. Yeah,
Okay.
it's weird because in this little corner there is some diversity, but you're
Mm-hmm.
right on that the God part they find interesting. But I
Yeah.
do think there is something where you get to it long enough, it's not
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah. Exactly. I completely agree with you because he doesn't go all the way, and that's why he always remains the middle figure, the bridge, let's say.
Yeah, which I think in some ways makes what he does very hard because
Yeah.
he leaves himself in the middle figure, and I don't think it's unwise for him to do so necessarily, but it's it's a certain burden that I couldn't do that. It would drive me insane.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
recently I heard Jonathan Pageau say that that's really him. That that's really Jordan. Like he's not faking any of this, you know.
Yeah.
And I believe that. So I have a great respect for Jordan still, and for Vaki as well. I had the pleasure of speaking to John recently, and it was quite special because I've listened to that series now 3 times. So he lives in my head. So it was good to actually like make that a bit more real.
Was that was that weird to have this guy who's in your head for so long sit in front of you and have a back and forth conversation, or did it feel like a natural flow?
Both, I guess. Like you see John Vaki on your screen, you're like, whoa, this is not something I'm watching. I'm participating. And maybe I will be watching. I had the same when I first did like a podcast ever. I was on Karen Wong's channel
Mhm.
a year ago, and I'd already listened to Karen's podcast, and I was like, wait, I'm actually inside of the corner now. That was a weird moment. Same as now, but now I'm used to it. You know?
Yeah, you get
Yeah.
desensitized to it.
Hmm. Yeah, but John was it was amazing to speak to. I've rarely met people, even online. It comes through how present he is, how much he really pays attention to what you're saying. Um, it also made it so that I couldn't get away with saying anything senseless. So you really start to watch your words.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's recorded anyway, so I'd have to do that regardless. But yeah, it was very, very impressive.
Yeah.
So to come back a bit to the story, I got into the self-help culture. This is when I took a gap year from high school. Partially that was because I was supposed to go travel a bit for modeling, because I did a little bit of modeling on the side. And this is also when the pandemic hit. So this is 2020. So all of that went through the water for then at that point, and I got a lot of free time, as did we all, I think. And yeah, I basically started to orchestrate my life in a self-help manner. So daily schedules, trying to learn the piano and learn to speak Spanish and start to read. I'd never read in my life. I started to read a lot every day. And my brother was very helpful in this because he always advised me what to listen to and what to read. So I'd start listening to podcasts and read books. And he'd always been that for me with music, but now he became that for me intellectually and philosophically. So that was cool.
Mm.
So he'd already been in this little corner, so he gave me like people to listen to, and I'm very grateful to him for that. So I also started running a lot, which was very good for the discipline, let's say.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, as this year progressed, I started to, I guess, intellectually start to understand the Bible more and how it made sense. Like I had to get over a lot of mental hurdles. My father and I went through the New Testament together.
Mm.
And at the end of that, something clicked inside of me, and I was like, okay, I got it. Like symbolically, this makes a lot of sense. And I can call myself a Christian. And I've had no trouble with that since. Then I did go to Milan for a bit of modeling, and I started to I lived together there with a Cuban guy, or Spanish. He was born in Cuba. And on the first day, he gave me a cross chain. And somehow that meant a lot because my mother meant to give one to me for the trip, but she didn't manage to get the necklace on. And then the first day I got there, he gave that to me.
Huh.
So that meant a lot. And I spent a lot of time there at a cemetery, and that drew me very close to the figure of Christ as well, a lot of in the sense of mercy, because I felt like I couldn't forgive myself for a lot of things. And I really had a couple of moments there where I really felt that connection very strongly. Um, yeah, and ever since then, it's been um, it's been looking up in my life, I think. I'm actually forgetting a major part here because this may be a bit blasphemous, but I had a psychedelic experience in this year too. So people have very different opinions about this, but I'll just tell the story. I got really interested in ayahuasca. I heard things about that from, well, I listened to the Joe Rogan experience, and he had some guests on talk about that. And it was very curious to me. And I won't go into too much detail, but that definitely broke me out of my materialist paradigm because I could hear arguments about a lot of things, but I couldn't believe in miracles, and I found it hard to believe in anything above my current reality. And that experience really drove me the opposite way, where I couldn't believe in a billiard ball universe anymore. It didn't make sense to me. That reality felt more real than this. And that was also pivotal for me. So that made me really understand religious texts much more. Like I started to really read beyond what I saw written. And my father was very helpful with that because he was also very interested in mysticism and Christian texts. And so that was very helpful. And yeah, ever since I started going to university, I started a degree in Egyptology in 2021. I'm at the end of that now, about to finish that in June. And I met my fiance. At some point, I listened to Jordan and his biblical lectures, and I decided that I wanted to get married. So I was 18 or something, and I was like, okay, let's do it. So I approached it the same as I did all the things that I wanted to succeed in, was just consistency, putting time into it. I decided I wanted to meet a girl every day, and then at some point I figured that my fiance would be there, my future wife. And she was. And that's been really brilliant. It's been a blessing. I expressed very early on that I wanted to go for the long term, and she felt similarly. She did tell me I had to wait until my family knew her family. And now that we know each other and each other's families, I got the green light. So that will also happen in June. So yeah, that's, I guess I'm finishing and starting a new chapter. Yeah. And so yeah, that's kind of how I rolled into the corner. And I started my own channel I started properly making videos a year ago. I've been doing a podcast, about 33 episodes in or so. And regardless of them being recorded and published, some of those conversations are the most cherished that I've had. And that's been a real blessing.
Yeah. That's what makes this corner very addictive. It's that human connection and those like very meaningful conversations that are hard to find other places. It's not that you can't have meaningful connections or, that sort of feeling outside. But there's just something weird and special about the collection of weirdos that find themselves here, meet each other and want to have these very deep conversations, and meet each other and listen to each other. So I can definitely agree with you there. These weird conversations have somehow, I don't know how much you know about my story, but my whole life is sort of flipped upside down with this little corner. So
let's do that, because you're famous. Your name is famous for me. Okay, so for me, to this little corner, I used to be very amazed by like famous people as a kid, and now the only people that I really find like cool to meet are people in the corner, because those are the people that like have been living in my head. So I've heard your name a lot, and I've heard a bit about you and Ferdy's story, and I met the both of you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to know, well, how you got here and how you got together.
Yeah. So I'll start a bit of like broad scope of my background and how it led me here, and then I'll kind of go into the X-Men origin stories of me being here. But I grew up in America, uh, Phoenix, Arizona, to a non-denominational Protestant family, very modern, very conservative, and spent most of my life there. First 21 years of my life there, and then I moved to Oakland, California, to go to San Francisco State University to get my degree in cinema, and that's sort of where I started asking deeper questions of what does it mean to be a Christian and hold the things that I believe. Because I had basically grown up in this little bubble. So it's like, okay, where I'm in now in California is the exact opposite, very
Mm,
irreligious, very liberal. What does it mean to be a Christian outside of that little bubble? And how do I make space for um, understanding things that are outside of what I believe in my life? And so I stopped going to church every Sunday and started having sort of conversations that you have here in this little corner, just in bars after work, and in cafes and in university and all those things, and just learning so much from people who thought very differently than I did. And I went through a somewhat similar path to you, except without the drugs and the alcohol, or I don't know if you did drugs in high school, but I sort of was pretty apathetic in high school. I did all the right things, but I was very apathetic. I didn't do well in school, and I kind of shirked a lot of responsibility. And then I had a little car accident that kind of refocused who I was and what I was doing. No one got hurt, and it was very minor, but it sort of made me realize, okay, I'm claiming all these things, but I'm not living it. And so that's switch kind of moved me into getting deeper into religion, not just claiming it and living good enough, but like really trying to figure out what is called of me in this thing, and why do I believe it? And if I do believe it, how do I believe it well? And when I did that, my life just exponentially got better. I just was less bitter. I had actual interest in learning things and all of that. And so I kind of took that into that attitude of like, oh, this thing is helping me, and it's growing me. And I took that attitude into how I was exploring religion when I was outside of my home in this little bubble,
mm,
and did that for a while and just kept learning and growing. And so I wasn't going to church, but I was still Christian, and I was still sort of living a very Christian life, if you looked at it, where I was trying to figure out the right things and move towards what was asked of me as a Christian. And then from there, I moved to Melbourne, Australia, did a year abroad there, and that's where I got introduced to new atheism in a
mm,
more serious way. And that, combined with a whole lot of other things, kind of shattered my categories a little bit. And this recognition of, hey, the stories that I've been given, some of the stories that I've been given, particularly politically and in other places, are not true, but I assumed it was true without really questioning it. So what else am I doing that with my life? And
mm,
that kind of went into this deep dive of religion, of like, if I'm going to call myself a Christian, I have to know why. And so I went down the apologetics atheist rabbit hole, trying to kind of figure out what it is I believe, and if I should call myself a Christian, because I couldn't deny that I believed it. But it's like, should I? Am I an idiot? Am I, am I what Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris all say? And
yeah.
one thing led to another. I got to a point where I went through and took all of that seriously and realized I was still a Christian.
Mm,
And so it was like, okay, well, what do? You move on, and you try to figure out how to do that. And at this point, when I was looking through new atheism, I had started going back to church again, just because I thought it would be helpful for me. But it was still sort of that question. But after going through that phase and feeling that confidence to call myself a Christian, being back in church buildings always felt a little odd for me. There was just sort of this tension of like, I've seen too much on the outside to come back in and feel like it was normal again. So I had a real struggle with that, trying to get grounded back into churches. And this kind of really hit its head when I moved back to Arizona after I finished my year abroad, coming back to my hometown, but not really having any of the same friends or the same church or the same, I wasn't living in the same part of the city. So it was all sort of rediscovering new and trying to ground that. And I had a really hard time trying to ground in churches, saying like, there's all these things going around me, and I don't think they're inherently wrong, but there's something about them that doesn't feel quite right, and I don't know how to explain it or whatever. And one thing after another. No, like at one point I was at some party and I met a friend, Christian, who we kind of got into a conversation, and it was like, again, like the stuff that you had in the corner. And he goes, "Oh, have you ever heard of Paul Vanderklay?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, you might not like him, but try listening to him." And I was hooked from there. Just, just the way that Paul talks about things. And it was interesting to see a pastor be so open to the outside and bringing all these things together to try to make sense of them in a more holistic way. And then eventually, my friend Christian, he had a conversation with Paul, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. I want to have a conversation with him." And so I weaseled my way into a randos conversation, and that sort of went from there. And so, I had a couple conversations with Paul, which was fun. And, I had connected with a few people in the corner through email before the Discord happened. But then once the Discord came online, that was sort of a big game changer. It was confusing for me at first because I'm okay with technology, but I don't like social media and I don't like being very online. And so there's all these text channels. It was confusing, but you hop into a voice channel and all of a sudden you're having live conversations and having these really interesting conversations and these very human conversations. And that was really intriguing to me. And so I spent, and actually I joined in 2019, the Discord. So that was before COVID, but that year and then all the years of COVID, again, I had a lot of downtime. So that became sort of the watering hole. Instead of going out to a comedy club and hanging out with people I knew there, or to a coffee shop, you go online and you sit at the open Discord chat and have conversations. And it was really, really helpful for me. And that's eventually how I became Orthodox. Someone there suggested I go to a service, and it just kind of all changed from that point. I went to my first Orthodox service and I wasn't expecting anything. I had been to Catholic services and I wasn't really drawn to tradition before that. It almost sort of was weird for me, but there was something about going to that service and the time and the place in my life that it all kind of fell into place. And it had this, I just saw this depth in it that I couldn't deny. And I had a really good conversation with the priest. And from that point on, it was like, I don't know what this is, but I want to know more about it. And I just don't feel comfortable calling myself a Protestant anymore. And so that's sort of when I started looking into Orthodoxy and trying to understand, is this going to be the thing that I can commit to? And I was always sort of hesitant with it for a long time because of all of the things that I went through with the deconstruction and looking through atheism. Of like, I had such confidence in this thing that I was given, and now it doesn't make as much sense to me anymore. I don't know if it's true anymore. I don't want to just jump ship and jump to anything else. So I think it took me 2 years to officially become Orthodox. But in that time, I met my now husband, and we had known of each other for about a year and a half. As long as the Discord had been around, we had known of each other, but we never had a real conversation. And then when COVID hit and we started having these conversations, we ended up in a Discord chat room together and started having a friendship, and that friendship eventually led to feelings. And so we had to kind of have that conversation of, okay, what is this? What are we going to do with this? And he was in an interesting space because we were kind of moving towards orthodoxy from different points. I was coming from, I'm confident that I'm a Christian and I really love orthodoxy. I think I'm going to become Orthodox, but I don't know for sure if that's what I'm going to fully embrace and commit to. And he really loved orthodoxy and found Jesus really compelling, but he didn't know whether he could call himself a Christian. And so we're coming from this point looking at orthodoxy, and I think there was this gap between that made it sort of difficult to know whether the relationship was actually going to work. Because if I do become Orthodox, I don't really have as well. I think as a Christian, whatever religion you kind of put yourself to, you don't have full control of your life, right? You're kind of adopting yourself into this story, and so it limits to you what you can do. And I knew with like if I was going to become Orthodox, I couldn't get married in an Orthodox church if they weren't a Christian. And so there was that whole thing, and it was like, do I even try to embrace this relationship? When it was doomed, and at the point I was 28, so it was sort of like, if I am going to get married, I have to, and if I want kids, I kind of have to get serious about it. So I can't waste 3 years and just hope this works. But there was just something in the relationship. We had this peace about it and it was a peace that I had felt about, like I hadn't felt that peace about anybody before. And so even though on paper it looked like a disaster and it was all these things that I said I would never do again, it was like, okay, let's give this a shot. And so we dated for 8 months, completely online. We didn't get to meet each other because of all the lockdowns. Then I flew over to the Netherlands. I was here 2 weeks, met him and his family. And then I flew back to the US. He came for Christmas. And then we both flew here to kind of move me to the Netherlands. And at that point, I still wasn't officially moved here. I was spending 3 months here, 3 months in the US, and then back here for a couple months before we flew back and got married. But it was sort of this wild thing where all of a sudden meeting Paul and doing this online thing not only changed my religion, it changed the country I lived in, my marital status, and now we have a kid. So my motherhood my motherhood status. And so and I guess it has been 5-6 years now. So it feels like it happened much shorter than on a much shorter time frame than it actually has been. But there's something weird about my whole life being flipped upside down in a short period of time because of this thing online. And yeah, it was not in my plan whatsoever.
That's super cool. When the Discord, it's without video, right?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the talks were without video, just the voice. But they do have a video function, so sometimes you would do video or whatever. And we would share photos. The Bridges of Meaning Discord is sort of weird in that way, where we kind of encourage self-doxing, if you will. Like we like people to say their real names, use their real faces, or at least a real name and a real face, so that you can feel some more human connection.
Yeah.
So it's not like we didn't know what it wasn't.
Yeah, I was gonna say
this blind situation.
Yeah.
We didn't know what each other looked like, but
yeah,
there was a bit of that sort of weird situation where a lot of our first interactions were just like group phone calls where we were talking with a bunch of strangers.
Was it obvious to you to move to the Netherlands as opposed to him moving?
Yes, but we didn't take it lightly. Like, so it's sort of weird because Ferdy, he's an adventurer at heart. So he's lived in a bunch of countries. He's lived in South Korea. He's lived in Australia. He's lived in Canada, Guatemala. he lived all over, and there was a long time where he didn't really feel at home in the Netherlands. And so there was this sort of loss of acceptance for him if he wasn't out traveling and living out of a suitcase in some ways. And through coming back home and going through sort of his low time and trying to figure out life and going through his own sort of meaning crisis, he found a comfortability being here in the Netherlands. And he had a job, he had just bought a house. And so he kind of said flat out, no, I can't move. I won't move. And for me, well, I was always, I grew up in the Protestant home with the idea of the man leaves his house and cleaves to his wife. So that idea that I would go here and he wouldn't come here, that was sort of upsetting a bit for my family. But for me, it was sort of like, well, you've gone through all of this uncomfortability of being grounded at home, and now you've found yourself in a place where you're willing to plant. I can't ask you to rip out the roots and come move. And I can do what I do from wherever. I'm an independent filmmaker. There's a lot of my life that lives in America, but that doesn't mean it's over if I move it. And I was sort of at that place too, where I was willing to be done with all of that, to have the family. I was always hoping that I could find some way to have a little bit of both, but I knew that if this was going to work out, the life that I would have with him would be far better than the things that I had then and now as a single person. And I've lived abroad before, so I enjoy it to a point. Like, there's always difficult things, but I enjoy it. So it just became easy, where it's like, yeah, if this is going to work, I'm gonna have to move. But I didn't take that step lightly. To rip out my whole life and move to a country or a man, that was something I said I would never do. And then to move to a country where I don't speak the native language, that's hard. It's easier because a lot of people speak English in the Netherlands, but learning Dutch is difficult.
Yeah.
I'm still not that good at it. I'm trying my best.
I would say the same about myself, and I'm a native, so it's just a sucky language.
Well, it's difficult. I was talking to your dad actually last weekend, and he was like, if any English speaker is going to learn a language, Dutch is probably the language to learn because they're so close.
Yeah.
And that is true, but that makes it tricky also because you want to fall into your English patterns.
Yes.
When you have to kind of break those and move into the Dutch.
Yeah, the similarity can be a curse and a blessing.
Yeah, so I have a lot of vocabulary. Like, I know over 2,000 words. I should be able to speak relatively well. I still struggle with the word order and structure.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I'm working on it.
That's so cool.
But anyways, so that's sort of this weird place where being online, and I would not say I watched a lot of YouTube. I've always watched YouTube, and I've watched a lot of media because that's sort of the art form that I find most fascinating and kind of centered my life around. But I would not say I was particularly an online person, especially probably from the age 18 on. I didn't like social media very much. I had it, but it was sort of a blessing and a curse. I love people, but the way that social media and online spaces change people and the way they connect always sort of was difficult for me.
Yeah.
And like, even for myself, like the way it changed me, I didn't always like it. And so there's always that back and forth. So now I always have to live with this weird dichotomy of there's so much about the online space that I don't like, but there's so much of it that it gave me the most beautiful things in my life. And,
yeah.
I think right now I'm in that weird place of trying to figure out that dichotomy and how to engage well with the online space, because you can't really get rid of it. It's too ingrained, and it brings too much good, I think, but it also brings a lot of bad. And so how do you manage that? I don't know. And yeah, and then there's that place of like how do you ground at home in a real life community, in a way that is healthy, especially when your whole life changes. I'm still kind of trying to wade into that one,
Yeah.
but it's yeah, especially in the last 2 years, my life has changed completely. Almost everything has changed,
Hmm.
and that's it's beautiful, but it's overwhelming.
Yeah, it's chaos, right? So
Yeah, but
you,
it's a different sort of chaos because I I worked in entertainment. I got my degree in cinema. I lived on sets and in comedy clubs. I, worked 4 jobs to fund the kind of work that I did. My life was always chaos before. And
yeah, I see.
in some ways my life is ordered now.
Yeah.
I have a routine. The baby definitely keeps you on a routine because every 3 hours she needs food, and she's very dependent on me to give her food. And you've got a house. But before living here, it's been a year living here full time, but before that, I never spent more than 3 years living in a place like settled. And a lot of that too, I was doing a lot of traveling. So probably besides COVID, the last 5 years, I traveled. I don't think I spent more than 4 months
Wow.
in one place at a time, and it drove me batty in a lot of different ways. And so it was a different type of chaos. So it's sort of weird. It's a weird sort of chaos where it is not as chaotic as I had before, but I'm not used to being so slow and feeling so lost is the wrong word, but so green and everything.
Hmm.
It's like I say this a lot with my faith. It's like I'm 30 years old and I'm starting over and feel like I'm 4.
Yeah.
In a tradition, Christianity, I think I still see my faith as sort of this extension of from when I was young and the thing that I gave before. But I'm still Christian, but I feel like I know nothing about it. You don't want to be 30 and feel like you don't know exactly what to think or what to do.
Well, in a way, it's beautiful. I think.
Yeah,
To me, those are the most interesting people when they don't know.
that's the thing. It is so beautiful. It's just hard,
Hmm.
um, because and maybe it's my pride. I definitely, I think I have pride that I haven't even wrestled with or admitted to myself. Um, but there's a certain uncertainty um, that can be debilitating when it's like I'm supposed to give my daughter, I'm supposed to help teach my daughter how to live, and I
Yeah.
don't
Okay.
know
I
what that
see.
means anymore. Like,
Yeah.
and it's not even just how to go about life, because I think there's some things that feel more confident than of like how to live life and find meaning. But I don't even know how to teach her how to have a proper conversation in what will be her native tongue, because I don't even know fully how to speak Dutch. That's really difficult. And then
Hmm.
with Orthodoxy, how do I teach her how to approach communion, or how to uh, do confession, how to um, behave in all of these things. What does theology mean? How do I teach her? I don't even know. So the things that I could be teaching her might not be right. That's really scary.
Yeah.
But I think there is something beautiful about it. Um, but it just kind of, it has its ups and downs.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so fascinating because the ups and downs that I experienced before were much higher. The ups and downs are
I
lower,
see. I see. Yeah.
but it's almost harder to manage. And it might just be my personality, because I'm that kind of person. I'm all or nothing too, and I'm sort of that extreme of like I'll throw myself into the deep end and kick until I can get to the top of the water, even if I don't know how to swim, you know? And so it's sort of like, when you have that real sense of chaos facing you every day, there's more of that knowing you just gotta fight and kick and do what you can to make it work. Whereas you have a lot of that stability. There's that debilitating sense of the best thing to do is to not flail and kick and try as hard as you can. It's to stop and observe and just let yourself feel
Yeah.
how inadequate you are at everything.
Hmm. Yeah, and it is beautiful. And I think also in your case, you're getting started here, and your daughter's so young, and so I think confidence grows with experience. So I wouldn't be so worried about it. I think you're gonna do great.
Well, it's a difficult thing too, because the motherhood part has not been a huge difficulty for me. Like
Hmm.
I was a little afraid it would be, but from the minute she was born, it was this very weird feeling, as if like this weird eternity moment, as if she has been here, she has always been here. Like I remember what it was like not to have a kid, but it was just sort of like she has always been and she will always be and she is here, and like
Yeah.
it was just so natural to be that mother. I think the difficulty for me more is letting go of everything else.
Mm.
Um, and I haven't let go of everything. Obviously, I still create. I still do this YouTube stuff, or at least as best as I can. I question whether I should keep doing it or not all the time. But there's a little bit of a trust pattern that I have to kind of go through to say, hey, I think this is a garden worth tending, even though I'm not sure. So I'm going to keep tending it. But yeah, there's that. Yeah, there's that sadness. I was talking to someone the other day at one of my estuary meetings, and they were asking me, "Oh, do you miss your old life?" And I was like, "I wish I didn't, but I do."
Mm.
And
Mm.
I wouldn't trade it for what I have, because what I have is far better.
Yeah.
Um, but I do miss it, and there's always that struggle. Do you just let it go completely and just keep moving forward? Do you find ways to uh, you know how would you say it, like re-enchant those things that
I
you had
see.
before in a way that can fit the life you have now?
Yeah.
I don't have the answers.
Well, it's good you're asking the questions. I think that's already so powerful, because a lot of people don't even get to the questions, and then you don't even know what you're struggling with. So a lot of problems can just lie underneath the surface, and then they creep up on you when they get bigger. But I think you're actively working on them and thinking through them and talking through them. And yeah, like I said, I think you're doing great. And I see the path. Like I see a very positive path.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm doing great. I think I'm trying um in ways that I can. There's definitely ways I could be better. But I also think that there's something about failing in that I need to learn.
Mm.
And I think there's a trust that whatever happens, it's all going to be okay in the end. It'll all be good. But yeah, there's definitely places where I could be better. I
Hmm.
know that. And like I that's a hard thing for me too. I went through sort of that self-help stage too, in a sense.
Hmm.
I mean, I've always been sort of an entrepreneurial type person, and I've done some real estate investing. I've done obviously I've taken a lot of risks in investing in a business to do creative things.
Yeah.
Um and that's been awesome and beautiful, and it's given me a lot of good things, but there's been a lot of questioning that sort of side of myself too, which does feel very American to me. And quite a sort of understanding how much of that is really helping me build a life worthwhile and meaningful, or is it pushing myself um, to extremes because I'm addicted to the challenge?
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
um, and so that's been somewhat difficult to kind of reorient and figure out. Where is my ambition killing me, and where is
Yeah.
it driving me to a life that's actually worthwhile.
Yeah, I really get that. I think that for me, when I have those types of questions, well, I like the framework of exploring and exploiting. So when you're not in the right spot, you need to explore more to find the right spot, and then you exploit that that spot. Let's say, or the job, whatever it may be. And for me, finding the right spot to be is most easily achievable by speaking to people around me that know me well, that know my qualities, that know what I thrive most on, because they see me usually better than I do myself.
Right.
Um, and I pray about it to really figure out what is my part to play, what am I supposed to be doing, and I think about it myself. But when I know that there's a spot where I shouldn't think about it too much, okay, then I just turn it off for a bit. But the reflection is extremely helpful. Um,
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. I think trying to do this stuff alone is um, like a suicide mission,
mm,
like in almost anything, but I think especially questions of meaning. Um, the difficult thing for me is that because of this intense change that I've gone through in the last 6 years, and specifically in the last two, I don't know who I am. The people who used to know me the
mm,
best think they know who I am in some sense, and they do know who I am in some sense, but they also have to kind of clash with this new person that I have become in this short amount of time. And then the people who know me now, um, they know me now. And so it's hard for them to know the full scope of who I
yes,
was,
I see.
who I am, and who I'm becoming.
What
And
about
so,
your family?
well, that's hard with my family. They knew me, they know me really well, and I still listen to them and take their advice and probably trust their advice more than anybody else. But I also know they put me in a box that I don't live in
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like they knew me as the Protestant, um, very uh, overeager, excited, creative person doing all these things who had very strong opinions and very self-assured. I'm still somewhat of that, but the orthodoxy has changed me in a way that I don't think they fully understand. And living here, like they didn't love me dating a person who lived on the other side of the world who didn't call themselves a Christian. They didn't love that I was willing to move my whole life here. They would much prefer me to be back home and all of those things. And I'm actually going back to visit next month. I think that'll be actually a really good thing because it's been over a year here, just completely here. And so going back home and getting a sense of familiarity, I think can be really helpful to kind of refocus. But yeah, there's always that piece of them that they know me really well and I have a good relationship with them, but they also that they don't know who I've become living here for a year. They don't fully know who I've become being Orthodox for 2 and exploring it for 4. Um, they see bits and pieces of it, but they kind of have this category of me from when they knew me, when I was living in close and shared the exact same religious story and a lot of the same ideas and beliefs as them, and that's changed. It's really weird to navigate that and know when to. And I mean, I always listen to them, but to know when to take their advice, that's been harder.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
Um, but that's it's not to say it's unhelpful. It's actually very helpful to have them, and I'm very glad I have a stable family, and I do have good relationships here. Um, it's just been hard to kind of have the deepest relationship and know uh, exactly um, how to navigate all those things, especially with the language barrier. Most people speak really good English, but you don't know how much they really understand you. There's always sort of that tension of um, crossing over the languages and trying to figure out, oh, am I being understood? And how do I operate in all of those things? And how do you operate a new culture? I mean, American culture and Dutch culture Similar in a lot of ways, but they definitely have
They're different, yeah.
differences.
Yeah.
That's it's weird to try to kind of assimilate to that and try to understand that, and still be myself for
Mm-hmm.
whatever that means, and
Mm-hmm.
what parts of myself are worth keeping, what parts of myself are worth letting go and transforming. I don't know. And a lot of it's not in my control.
No, it isn't. But I would go back to the point that it is just a year thus far.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those relationships that you're building now, none of them are older than a year.
Yeah.
So as they grow, they also get deeper. So I think that I really do feel confident that you'll feel more confident.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know, I really love seeing people, I don't want to say struggle, but search. Because in that search, you see the seeds of such a beautiful potential reality.
Mm.
And really do wish that for you, for the both of you. Well, for the three of you.
Thank you. No, I mean, again, there's just this picture that I see of it all that's more beautiful than anything that came before, in a way that I couldn't have designed even if I tried, and I certainly tried. Um, but yeah, that middle space. I talk to my husband all the time. It's like, it's not bad. In fact, it's good, but it's hard.
Yeah,
And so, how do you
that's
be honest
exactly it.
about that? Like, I don't know how to even express it, because nothing's bad. And like, um, the worst thing about it is just me feeling a lack of direction, and so I don't do as much as I would want. But even then, I also think my ideas of productivity and success are slightly warped, even though um, they're probably healthier than broader culture. But when I was pregnant, there was a lot of things I couldn't do. I was sick all of the time. There's just things that I couldn't do, and so um, I was trying to fill my time as best I could, but I couldn't. I couldn't work a job that brought money in. I did a little bit, but it was just sort of freelance things, and it was a much smaller scale. I couldn't. I couldn't continue the things that I had built before, and I felt unproductive. But my body was literally the most productive it's ever
Yeah.
been.
Yeah, that's
Like
ironic.
in a like real physical way. And so
Mhm.
there's something in me that's sort of warped in that, and I'm recognizing that, where and I've always been very hard on myself, not in a destructive way, but it's probably somewhat destructive, but like in a way that sort of like, I just want to keep pushing and
Yeah.
be as excellent as I can be at anything
Yeah.
I take on.
I
Um,
recognize that.
and so, anything to its extreme can be weakness, but
Mm-hmm.
there's something in that where losing that side of me, I'm very okay with losing it. But there's that sort of switch in my head where I need the downtime to do less and um, recover and figure out what it means to take on this new role. And if I can bring my old life into that. But yeah, there's always that thing of like, I want to be doing more, especially with the religion, right? Like, I want to know more. I want to be a better Orthodox. I want to be better at prayers. I want to be better at fasting. I want to be
Ah,
better at all of these things. But to just do them is not going to make you better. You have to be patient with those things. And pregnant and breastfeeding, you're not supposed to fast. Your priest tells you not to fast.
yes.
So I feel like I'm cheating, but I know I'm not cheating. But there's that thing in me where it's like, oh. And the prayers, it's sort of like, I try my best to do them, but I also realize I don't know how to do this well, and I don't want to just do it to do it. But I don't want that to be excuse not to do it. And so I'm just in that kind of stretching phase where
Mm-hmm.
I've settled, I've found roots. I'm not searching anymore. I'm not going around to all these religions trying to find out which one's true and which one I can live in and feel confident committing to. That's answered. But now it's like, okay, what does that mean for the rest of my life? And a lot of it, yeah, you feel stupid in some ways. And I know I'm not stupid, but I was talking to someone who was they had to learn German. They're Spanish. They moved to Germany. They had to learn German. It's like, it's really difficult to be in a conversation and you just feel like an idiot. You
Yeah.
don't know how to joke. You don't know how to make a full sentence. You just feel so stupid. And you know you're not stupid, but you just feel it. That's really hard for me. And
Yeah.
it's probably all pride. Like, I'm just saying it now, and it's like, it's all pride. It's all my own pathologies.
Mm.
But it is really difficult trying to navigate that and be okay being that child again.
I love that.
Because that,
It's
like, it's very weird having a baby now. And I was a nanny for other families, but my sister, before I moved here and had a
Mhm.
baby of my own. And all of my sisters had kids before I did. And so I got to be the aunt and watch them, and just realizing kids are so much smarter than we ever give them credit for. And that realization of like, having a kid basically lets you relive your whole life over again, because you get to watch them and see that and remember that thing that came before for you. And so there's something really beautiful about that. It's this adult version of myself that I always have to fight, that kind of wants to squash that. And maybe it's the challenger in me too, where it's like, I don't want to be a kid my whole life. I want to be as excellent as I can at the thing that I have. But at 4 years old, you can't expect the same as when you've had more years in it. So it's such an odd place to ground. And I just don't, I feel so terrible even like complaining about it. And I
No.
don't think I'm complaining about it, but like acknowledging that it's hard or feeling emotional about it. I beat myself up about that, because like, it is beautiful. There's something beautiful about it. And the fact that I hate it, I hate that I hate it. What's going on with me? I can't, I can't, yeah, I haven't had that place where like the emotion settled and it, like, I'm in that place where I'm feeling
I
all
see.
of it.
Yeah, you're in the
And
zone.
like, and it's not just emotions, it's the rationalizations and like that like transformation where you're like whittling away at things. But it's like, yeah, you're in that process where it hasn't cleared out. You can't,
Mhm.
it's like the marble statue. Things are falling apart, but you can't see the figure in it yet. If that makes
But it will
sense.
come.
Yes. And like,
Yeah.
you kind of have it in your mind, like your mind's eye, right? And
Yeah.
you're just chipping away, hoping it gets close to that.
Mhm. Well, I think you have a lot of mechanisms in place that help you move
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
So that's very positive. I mean, the fact that you know what you want in terms of you have your husband and your child and your tradition, I think it's a lot.
Yeah, but that gets difficult too, because there were lots of things that I wanted 5 years ago that I don't think were as noble as I once thought they were. So
So
so there's always that sense of like, well, how much of my wants is a deception too? Now,
ah,
I say that thing with the confidence that I don't think I'm deceiving myself in the idea that a family and kids and my religion and a good spiritual practice is something not to strive for. But there's something in that of like, I just don't, even my own sort of desires and wants, I put to the towards the sort of firing squad, if you will, to try to really like figure out like, is this thing really worth preserving?
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, on top of all of that, I've when I went through my deconstruction phase, through that I started having manic episodes. Not
Mm.
often, but enough to where it's sort of that realization of stability and staying grounded and trying to understand those things are really important, especially if I'm going to have a kid and a family and all of those things. And so there's always that frame too of like, there's all this change. How do you manage that and keep your sanity? How do you manage that and find the true good and beautiful things through it all? It's just another pressure. And
Yeah.
that's, I think that part is probably the least difficult because I just, even in the worst moments of my uh, psychosis, if you will, like it taught me beautiful things and it helped me distinguish from the good from the bad and all of those things. But it's such a different burden to carry all of those things when there are other people on your boats than when you're the captain of your own ship and a one-man operation.
Yeah.
It's it's just there's a responsibility that debilitates me. Good or bad, I don't know. Probably a little bit of both. But I don't think I know how to operate it with it well. But I'm lucky that I have a husband who's amazing and completely supportive in that, and gives me trust even when I don't trust myself. A daughter who's beautiful and sweet and just so full of potential, and a community that has that same eagerness to try to figure out how to participate in these things well. So
I think when the questions come up about decisions or about beliefs or wants, I always try to think about whether or not my wants or my choices are beautiful. And when I'm really sure they're beautiful, I don't question them anymore. Like, I think what you did and the child you have, that's like so undeniable. And that the questioning of them to me seems what would be difficult even, because like they're so beautiful, and wanting to come closer to God, for example, that's so beautiful. That's when I know I don't have to question anymore. The ones I really question for me are the are the ugly things that I like, or the resentful opinions sometimes, or the things that are not making my reality more beautiful, more true, better, that don't benefit the people around me. And from what I hear, I mean, I don't know you that well, but from what I hear, you make the reality around you better, especially for your child. I mean,
man, I try.
yeah, that's all you can
That's
do.
all you can do. And I think I think there's enough faith in the path that I'm on. It is beautiful, so I keep walking it. And that's where it sort of gets to the place where it's great, it's good, but it's hard. And it's hard in a way that I've never experienced before, because instead of like rock climbing, you just had the slow incline. And I don't know how much hiking you've ever done, but like I grew up in Arizona, so I'm used to all of these different kinds of mountains. And my least favorite are the small inclines that just take forever.
Yeah.
Because all of your muscles are burning, but you feel like you're doing nothing. And you're just there's nothing to distract or challenge you. You just got to like put one foot in front of the other. Whereas when you kind of have those challenges where you have to climb up the rocks and kind of figure out how to do it, and it's more strenuous, that's a little easier for me in challenging that, because there's so much else going on to make sure I don't die, that I'm not just like, everything is burning.
Yeah. So what is the mountain you're on?
I mean, the mountain that everybody else is on. I don't think I'm on some superior mountain. I think we're all on the same mountain at different parts. I definitely feel like I'm somewhere in between peaks.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. But there's this one part of me that wants to slow down and feels like maybe I should just give up and settle to the slow down and just plant. And there's another part of me that's not ready to give up the next peak. And so you're kind of just wandering around until you figure out which one you're going to do.
Yeah. I think the peaks always come though, unexpectedly.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, I've always been I've been somewhat controlling in my life, in that like I like to look to a challenge, go for it, and finish it and complete it and figure out
Yeah.
all the steps in the way to do that. And the life that I chose basically said, you're going to give up this thing. You're probably not going to get it. And you're going to settle for this thing. And by settle, I don't mean like, oh, like it's lesser than. It's just literally settling. And maybe you'll get a taste of this again or not, but that doesn't matter. You just kind of have to figure out and settle and be willing to realize that the life that you had and what you were moving towards, letting that go is not a failure. And losing that control is not a failure. So like learn to live without all that control. That's difficult.
Yeah.
But like it's absolutely necessary. That's the thing. It's like it's absolutely necessary. And I'm just trying to find that place. Where am I giving into the necessary? And where am I torturing myself to be farther along on some path that I think I should be? But my husband has been so helpful in this, because our personalities are very different. And I think we saw this most specifically in sort of our journeys to religion, where I always said, it's like we were both in a stream. And I was swimming against the current, trying my best to get to the place where I thought I needed to go. And my husband was sort of just letting the current take him where it needed to and enjoying the journey along the way. And so he kind of is that balance to me of like, hey, life doesn't always have to be miserable. Like, yeah, carry your cross and try to do the right things, but you don't have to, you don't have to do that to its extreme to be beautiful. Sometimes the thing you need to do is the easy, beautiful, good thing that you want to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I get a taste of that there, where it's like, this is what I want to do, this is where I want to be. And I'm really glad that I was given that, and that I felt permission to do that. But it comes with all of this other stuff that I have to relearn everything on what it means to pursue the beautiful. Because the beautiful picture I never question. It's the way in which
So that's changed now.
play it out totally changed.
Yeah.
And that's I think there's a place that I've lost confidence in myself in knowing what's good. And so I'm trying my best to rely on what I've known before and community to help get a better sense of how to move forward. But it's still in that infant stage.
Yeah. Okay. So you're learning to be a beginner again.
Yeah. I mean, how is it for you? Because it seems like you're still sort of in that new stage where it's very exciting. I mean, I remember when I was 18, that's sort of when religion, I recommitted myself to religion, and it was just like it was just all good. It didn't matter what hardships or face. It was just so easy. I don't know if that's what it's like for you, but how is that kind of retransitioning in and trying to participate in the God question now that you can believe it?
Yeah, so first church, I went to a Protestant church growing up, and that was really difficult for me. I didn't like it much, also because I didn't participate. I would even sit upstairs alone. And I knew when I could call myself a Christian again that that's not what I wanted. I wanted something that was more alive. I wanted something that, I think was more active and that had more mystery as well. So there is an Orthodox church close here. It's an Egyptian one, and studying Egyptology helps with that in terms of some languages. But I find it hard to see how I integrate into that, especially like Coptic, because it's mostly Arabic speaking people, and it's something that is familiar but also not. And then I also tried to go to, bless you, I tried to go to
Thank you.
I did to a Roman Catholic church as well.
Mm.
And it was international and I liked that.
Mm.
But then I start hearing that little voice again, my little skeptic voice, like, why is this guy being a social justice warrior in the church? I struggle with that. And then I listen to all my little people in the corner and beyond that. And the only thing, same as you, that I never question is, well, it's my faith in God and in Jesus and my identity as a Christian. That's something I never question, but I guess for me, it's not been easy
Mm.
in that sense. I don't find it easy to bind myself to one specific denomination or place. What has been beautiful and I guess effortless is submitting myself to God, in the sense that whenever I question how I should act or what I should do, I just try to act as He did and does.
Mm.
Um, that has been extremely freeing, and that has completely transformed my life. Like, I don't wrestle so much anymore with what's right, especially in action, so participation. But yeah, what that looks like in terms of this and that, and what I bind myself to, that's so difficult because, similar to you, my family is completely different. I have a lot of secular people around me, my friends. It's very mixed, big mixture actually. I also have Muslim friends, and
Mm.
I don't feel any shame or fear regarding faith, and I gladly speak to anyone about it, but I don't know exactly where I belong
Mm.
church wise,
Yeah.
if I belong. And yeah, so
Yeah, that's
that's
really
something I'm
difficult.
discovering.
No, that's really difficult because I mean, I never I think I always considered myself a Christian, like even when I was young. But then at 18, it kind of became a different participation where I really kind of took it on myself. But there, I did have a place to belong. I did have a place I could easily put myself in. And that's what made it easier. It was just putting myself in and diving deeper in that. It's really when that recognition of the person who I was doesn't necessarily fit in that story anymore. That was harder because it's, do you just commit because you don't want to be a church shopper?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but there's a lot of, that's what I had to learn because that's what I did for a long time. It's like, you don't shop church. Like, that's just not what I wanted to do. Every church is going to have a problem. You commit as best as you can and you do what you can. But there was a lot of struggle in that was detrimental, and that realization, I think, with orthodoxy is realizing that right practice is really helpful in a sustainable participation. And yeah, that's sort of that question I have now. It's not the question of the beauty of the church or Christianity or even the idea of God and how that manifests itself in my life in all these different ways. But what is right practice? Yeah, and when you get a confidence um, of right practice or right belief, and then it gets shaken, I don't know. I think it's just human nature to kind of have that skepticism of how you do this
Yeah.
well and like where you're submitting yourself to, because that changes your story
Mm-hmm.
really significantly. It changes the
Mm-hmm.
way that you live life. Um, and yeah, I don't think there's an easy answer.
No, no. And it's why I hold on very closely to the things that I do know that seem to um, bear fruit in my life. And that's just prayer and really being a bridge to other people and
Yeah.
trying to take God with me every day and everything I do.
Do you find it harder in Europe? I mean, you probably don't have, well, you've traveled a little bit, so you might have a little bit of a difference. But what I hear from a lot of my European friends, especially Dutch, it's the idea of religion is so odd that, they're sort of like, your brother always says, be nuchter, like, be normal, or yeah, be normal, like
Yeah,
normal's weird
do
people
normal.
sort of thing. Yeah, yeah, do normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. um,
So I don't have a lot of Dutch friends. I must say, I live in The Hague, so
Oh, right. So that's a very
Yeah,
international city.
my environment is actually quite open to religion, and I think it's
Mm.
also changing. I've been trying to really map what's happening in terms of collective unconscious and what people are thinking about consciously. And I think people are changing their views on God because they're realizing that new atheism is not very strong, or atheism in general. I do see it cracking a lot. So do I find it harder in Europe? I think, of course, it would be easier if it's in a very religious setting.
Yeah.
But I think then I would also be kind of the black sheep that kind of
Yeah.
questions. So I naturally resort to the more nuanced
Position.
position, and I always am very open about my faith to anyone,
Mm.
regardless of anything. But it's also particular to my personality, I guess. Like as soon as I knew, I would start wearing the cross, and start like,
Yeah. Well, that's where I find it interesting because I don't feel weird being religious here in Europe. But I wonder if that's just bred from the cultures that I was in before, where it's
Mm,
not secularism is rising in America, but it's not weird to be religious. And generally it's not frowned upon even in very secular cities. Like, if you're sort of not um obnoxious about it, people are more I really think people are more interested than we give them credit for. And that's living in really secular cities, being in very secular industries. Like, I had really positive, beautiful conversations about religion from people of all walks of life, and particularly a lot of atheist, non-religious people. Like, I think there's sometimes this perspective that people who are secular are more antagonistic to religion than they are, and I just haven't found that to be true. Um, but yeah, I don't know if sort of this pressure that I've heard some of my European friends talk about finding religion is more my culture or my personality. Because I think we do have similar personalities in that
yeah, I
sense.
think it's similar with the both of us. I was gonna say,
Yeah.
because I think the way you speak about it influences it so much, and the ability to do so. I know a
Mm.
lot of people that are afraid of any arguments against their faith or anyone questioning their faith. For me, it's fun. Like I like it.
I think especially at the beginning, it was like, well, I want to know. I was much more truth focused when in the first sort of half of my faith journey than I am now. I'm much more beauty focused. Although
Yeah.
truth does matter to me. I haven't lost that, but um, if I'm believing something that's not true, I want to know. And so there
Mm,
might be a fear of facing something and my life being built on some huge delusion, but I would rather know that and readjust my worldview than just live in my little la la land, right? And so when it came to new atheism, it was sort of like there was lots of things about that was scary, I suppose. But I was also sort of like, if it's true, I want to know. And the irony of all of that, by taking new atheism seriously, it made me confident in my
yeah.
my Christianity. And so
Yeah.
that's where um, I do think, yeah, the fear of deconstruction and new atheism and all of these things is sort of um, over uh, yeah, overblown, I guess.
Mm,
Maybe that's not the right word, but I think it's too much, because the fear is making us act in weird ways where it's like, no, I don't want people to lose their faith. I don't want them to become secular materialists, because I don't think a lot of good comes from that in the long term. I think it makes life harder to live. But like, sometimes you have to go through that to get to a place where you can have an honest participation with spirituality.
yeah. Yeah. And I think going back to the idea, is it more difficult in Europe? I think it's more difficult if you haven't done what you did.
Yeah.
It's more difficult to stand up to that criticism and that that misunderstanding or failure to understand. I understand them so well, and that makes them understand me better. Because I walk that walk of viewing reality that way, and
Right.
that helps. So I think I see a lot of fear in people that grew up religious and always stayed in that and never poked a lot of holes in that.
Mm.
Um, and then it's usually also a bit more vulnerable. But Europe compared to the US, what is true for sure, especially in the Netherlands, is we have a lot of atheists, and we've had that for a while,
Yeah.
and that might even be growing. I'm not sure. I haven't checked, but so there's less. I don't know. It's less normal. It's
Yeah.
really something you almost have to excuse. Like, oh, I'm gonna pray. Sorry. Like it's not
It's
normal.
it's interesting because I lived in the U.S., so I lived in Arizona, which is very conservative Christian. So it was very normal. Like my upbringing was very normal to me, and I'm realizing now it was much more fringe than I ever recognized. But that's a conversation for another time, probably. But like that, the idea that people were religious, it was just sort of normal. Then you go to the Bay Area, and people didn't like religion, but they would respect you if you were religious, especially if you weren't like cramming it down their throats. Like they might think you were an idiot, but they'll engage with you. And then when I moved to Australia, I don't know if this is full culture or just sort of the culture I was in, but it was much more antagonistic to religion. Um, Europe, it seems people are just sort of indifferent or ignorant to it. They're not against it. They just don't understand it.
Yeah.
And so it's such a different, like, yeah, people are secular, but it's not, it doesn't seem like they have an axe to grind. It's just something that's been lost. And it does seem like there's a lot of people kind of eager for something more.
Yes. Yeah. It's like museum type of relationship to religion.
Yeah.
Or we have it in school as well. We have religion class in high school, I guess, and it's more approaching it of like a study kind of thing. Like you go to a mosque to like study the people there, and you to get a thing on Buddhism, and you look at it like they're ancient people, doing something.
It's so interesting the way, because how old your cities are, religion is built into the city in ways
Yeah.
that I think people don't like register. Like
No, we don't realize it anymore.
the fact that the churches are in the center, like, to me, like it screams the history of the religion, but it's sort of kind of normal.
Yeah.
But there's so much of the religious practice, like my mother-in-law, they don't go to church every Sunday, but they still will donate to a church, and they were excited to see my daughter baptized.
Yeah.
Where my parents, they were sort of like, why are you baptizing her? Because
Yeah.
baptism is a choice, right? And so it's sort of this weird thing where it's like the non-religious person is more comfortable with me baptizing my kid than the practicing religious people.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me. I don't fully get it.
Yeah. So here I know of people that send their kids to Christian schools. Sometimes they even baptize them because they
Yeah.
realize that it's usually just better. They approach it strategically. Like so they think those kids sometimes they come out better. So then they
So
do it.
it's all pragmatic.
I don't know. It depends on the person, of course, but I think a lot of people are starting to realize the pragmatic aspect of that. Like we have this term, culturally Christian,
Mm-hmm.
like people that don't go to church, but they like the values, and then they think that they can just take the values and leave all the practices and the beliefs. Um, I think that might be where we are in the Netherlands, at least. I mean, Europe is extremely different, of
Right.
course. We
Yeah,
have more
there's
Catholic South, and there's a lot of nuance, but yeah, like generally, I think there's a lot of that now. A lot of people, I think, more conservatively minded are really seeing like a gap that religion leaves when it's not there anymore.
right.
So people that want to believe in God, and that's changing. Um, but yeah, it's a lot of that that idea that like yeah, it's kind of good for the kids, good for the
Well, and you're seeing that in sort of the movements too, right? Like
yeah,
Tom Holland, Louise Perry, these people who are sort of
exactly.
moving towards more religious-minded practices, but not going all the way to being religious. There's something about that, like pragmatism,
Hmm.
that might be broader Europe, but I don't know. I just don't know it enough. But there's something different about the secularism here than secularism that I've experienced in any other place that is intriguing to me. It seems almost more susceptible to the growth of religion, like more organically and healthily than
Ah,
anything that I've seen otherwise.
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you would be much more apt to speak about it because I'm only here. I've traveled a bit, but yeah, it's very interesting to hear from me because I find it hard to zoom out. Like it was interesting when Paul was here and he was like, "There's churches everywhere." Like you call yourself secular.
Yeah.
That's something he really noticed. like we don't know the US. I don't know the US very well, and it's so young as well compared to Europe. Um, and I think also talk about like in the US you have a lot of like this woke movement, and the woke movement is making a lot of people realize the value of religion. Like I see very popular figures being like, oh, I see that when people are atheists, they kind of like take that, they adopt it. But in the Netherlands, people are also not really adopting that as much. Like
The wokeness.
yeah, less so. I think maybe it's because these are the people that stayed and didn't take the boat to the to the other side of the world. They just seem to be a bit more, I don't know, they don't grab onto things very quickly. So they're more open. They're not
Yeah,
open. They're
well,
more
because the political wokeism and just the politicism on either side, right or left, it is very religious in nature.
yeah,
And
exactly.
I think in America, although secularism is rising, we have such a value on religious and religious expression
Yeah,
because of our history,
yeah,
because we fled for religious persecutions, and that's the type of settlement that won out, as opposed to all the other settlement that kind of came in different parts of the US. That might be why we're more susceptible to that. Like we're just more religious minded. Even the non religious people are still more religious. Where here, it's like your culture is religious, but your people aren't as religiously dogmatic.
yeah.
And that can manifest in good and bad ways, but like
Hmm.
they're they're not looking for something to fill the meaning. They're
Hmm.
they're doing normal. They're
Yeah.
just trying to live, and do
Mm.
that. And so I could see how maybe that's why the wokeism isn't picked up as much, because it's
Yeah.
in a lot of ways it is asking you to be part of a religious system of sorts.
True. True. But then some of my American friends, they'll just tell me like it will come. It's just a bit. It's a
I
bit
think it.
slower.
I think it will. I think that's also true. But I think things are secular, or yeah, secular, and um, you guys beat us to secularism, but I think you'll also beat us to rebirth of religion in
Mm.
ways before we catch up to it.
That's interesting to track. I'm curious. I
Yeah,
wonder.
I I think it will, and
Yeah.
I think it will happen in more traditional churches than sort of what's growing in America right now, which is a lot of the evangelical,
Hmm.
like Protestant, more modern things. I think in the long term, whatever denomination, Catholic, Protestant, or Orthodoxy, I think those traditional churches are going to see an uptick.
Ah.
I think you're already seeing it. And I
Mm.
noticed it in America and in the US. Like we have so many interested people or converts coming into the church
Yeah.
in ways that I didn't see even in the evangelical churches that were really looking to get
Yeah. They
in.
were pushing for it.
Yeah,
I
and
see.
so it's just this weird thing. Something's happening, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know what it means, but just looking at what I came from and seeing what's going forward, I do think that there's probably um, this revival of traditional religion that will take place at some point. Um, when and where and how, I don't know. But I do
Yeah.
see something in the way that the European culture is that makes it more fertile for that kind of
Yeah.
tradition first.
Yeah. I think so too. I think we spend now a lot of time battling about the ideas, and like I said before, I do think that the arguments for atheism are getting weaker and weaker, and you have more and more people, especially online. It goes so quickly, like Jordan Peterson's of the world, and I really see in him also someone that's laying a lot of groundwork for religious revival, even though I'm not sure he's religious himself.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Which is
Like the
so
whole
odd.
arc movement
Yeah.
seems like fueled with religious language.
Mm.
Um, so
But
yeah,
that,
I think so too.
but part of that I think is politically fueled too.
Yes,
So
definitely.
that's its own sort of type of religion. But
Yeah, yeah. I'm also that's what I asked. I asked John Vervaeke about it. Like, what do you think is going to happen with this? Um, and his honest answer was, I don't know, but I'm cautious. Paul was cautious as well, but
yeah,
he was a bit persuaded, I think, because he went himself to see,
yeah,
and he did see a lot of like the Christian spirit underneath, the beauty part of that. But there is also a dark side to it.
Well, there's always that danger,
Hmm.
but I mean, it's in the beauty too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we should probably land the plane.
Yeah, it's starting to get
Yeah,
dark, as you
it's
can
starting to
see.
get dark.
Yeah.
Any last words before we kind of close out? It's so lovely getting to know you a little bit more and having this conversation. And
Yeah,
it's lovely too, because a lot of the conversations that I have, they're people across the world, but like we saw each other last weekend. So
yes, exactly. My last words are very similar to yours. I'm extremely grateful that you invited me on. It's a pleasure getting to know the famous people in the corner.
gosh, it's so weird to think about that. When I first got on the Discord, I remember, and I don't even know who it is. I jumped into a Discord conversation, and someone was like, "Are you the Cassidy?"
E. Cassidy.
And I was like, "This feels so weird because I'm not famous in any way, shape, or form." But there is this weird way that I've forced myself into this corner that has made me somewhat famous. But I don't even know how famous I am anymore, because when I was doing some of the festival stuff, I made a post about it on Discord, and someone was like, "Who are you?" I was like, "Boom, I'm back in my
Reality
place."
check.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. But I appreciate you, wanting to have a talk with me. I
It
hope
was absolutely great.
I hope my fame didn't overcome this conversation.
No, it was great. You did very well. It was a
Yeah.
pleasure. I'm looking forward to hearing some responses to it.
Yeah, and I'm
And
sure we'll have many more conversations.
exactly, we'll do it on my channel next time.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I will close with the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.